Think about this for a second. In just 5 years, one of Europe's most modern democracies completely collapsed and turned into a totalitarian nightmare. Now, this isn't some piece of ancient history. It's a warning. And in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how it happened.
So how could a democracy die? That's the core question here. And honestly, it's not just about the past. It feels incredibly relevant today. How does this system that's built on the will of the people fall apart so completely and so fast? Well, the story starts in a place you might not expect.
To really get the sheer shock of this, you have to go back to 1928. At that point, the Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler, was basically a fringe movement. Yeah, they were loud and they made a lot of noise, but politically, they were pretty much irrelevant.
And then, bam, just 5 years later, they had absolute power. Every other political party was just gone, wiped off the map. The Democratic Constitution was basically worthless. This wasn't a slow, creeping decay. It was a flash flood that swept everything away.
So, the big question is, what on earth happened in those 5 critical years? How did Germany go from a struggling but functioning democracy to an all-out dictatorship? The thing is, it wasn't just one single event. It was more like a perfect storm. A devastating mix of crisis, a dangerous ideology, and massive political failure.
To figure out why the house collapsed, you've got to look at the foundations, right? And the truth is, Germany's post-war democracy was built on some seriously unstable ground.
So you had this new government called the Weimar Republic. It was Germany's first real shot at democracy, but it was born under a really dark cloud. Right from the start, it was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles. Imagine signing a document that says the war was all our fault and agreeing to pay crippling sums of money. From day one, a lot of Germans didn't see their new democracy as a symbol of freedom. They saw it as a symbol of national shame.
And in that environment, a really toxic idea started to spread. It was a conspiracy theory called the stab-in-the-back myth. The lie was that the German army was never really defeated in battle. Instead, it was betrayed, stabbed in the back, by enemies at home. This wasn't just some fringe idea. It became a powerful weapon used to poison the well of democracy right from the get-go.
So you've got all this anger and these myths floating around. It's like a pile of dry kindling. All it needed was a match. And that match came in the form of a new and very dangerous ideology.
National Socialism, you know it as Nazism, offered people simple and incredibly violent answers. It said, "We'll make Germany proud again." It called democracy weak and useless. And crucially, it gave people enemies to blame for all their problems. It was all built around total loyalty to one leader, the Führer, and this belief that Germany needed more Lebensraum, or living space, which it planned to take by force.
And let's be absolutely clear about something. Racial theory wasn't just some side project for the Nazis. It was the engine of the entire ideology. This quote from Hitler's own book, Mein Kampf, just lays it all out there. For them, all of history was just one big racial struggle. Their main goal, above everything else, was to protect the purity of their so-called Aryan race.
Now, for most of the 1920s, this nasty ideology was just simmering on the political fringes. The German economy was actually starting to recover, and life was getting a bit more stable. It was going to take a global catastrophe to push these ideas from the edge right into the center of everything.
Just look at this number, 3%. That's it. In the 1928 election, that's all the support the Nazi Party had. They were basically a political joke. Remember that number because it's our starting point.
And then the floor fell out from under the entire world economy. The 1929 Wall Street crash kicked off the Great Depression. All those American loans that were propping up Germany, they vanished, literally overnight. The country's economic lifeline was just cut.
And the result was devastating. By 1932, almost a third of all German workers had no job. 30%. People's savings were wiped out, and the democratic government, it seemed totally powerless. Despair and rage were everywhere, and when people are desperate, they start looking for drastic solutions.
This chart, wow, it tells the whole story, doesn't it? As unemployment soared, so did Nazi support. It's almost a perfect correlation. From that tiny 3% in 1928, they jumped to 18% in 1930, and then all the way to being the single largest party in Germany by 1932. They had successfully taken all that economic pain and rage and turned it into pure political power.
Okay, so now they're the biggest party. But that's not the end of the story. You don't just win an election and become a dictator. The next part is maybe the most terrifying part. How the tools of democracy were turned against it to destroy it from the inside. So, a group of conservative politicians who were more afraid of the communists than they were of Hitler made a deal. They thought, hey, we can use this guy, we'll make him chancellor, and we'll control him from behind the scenes. It turned out to be one of the worst political miscalculations in history. From that moment, as you can see on this timeline, things moved at a breathtaking speed. A suspicious fire at the Parliament building was the perfect excuse to suspend all civil rights. In just 18 months, every single democratic institution was taken over or destroyed.
And this right here, this was the legal kill shot for German democracy. It was called the Enabling Act. It was passed by intimidating what was left of the parliament, and it basically said that Hitler's government could pass any law it wanted, without anyone's approval. The Constitution was now just a piece of paper. Democracy was officially over.
And with that power in hand, they didn't waste a second. The so-called Nazification of Germany began immediately. All other political parties were banned. Anyone who spoke out was crushed. The first concentration camps were opened, not for Jewish people at first, but for their political opponents, communists, socialists, anyone who dared to resist.
So, okay, the democracy is gone. It's dead. But that leaves a really tough question, doesn't it? Why did so many ordinary people just go along with it?
And here's where things get really uncomfortable, but it's so important to understand. The Nazis, they actually delivered on their economic promises. They launched these huge government projects, like building the new highway system, the Autobahn, and poured tons of money into rebuilding the military. And you know what? It worked. Unemployment basically vanished. For a lot of Germans who just wanted a job and food on the table, that success was enough. They were willing to look the other way on all the brutal stuff and the loss of their freedom.
Which brings us right back to where we started. The fall of the Weimar Republic isn't just a story about something that happened a long time ago. It's a roadmap, really, a roadmap of how things can fall apart. It shows you what happens when you mix a deep economic crisis with national humiliation, add in some conspiracy theories, and then you have political leaders who are willing to tear down democratic rules to get power. So I'll just leave you with this one last question. After seeing how it all played out back then, what are the warning signs you would watch out for today?